I'm Marianne Williamson, and thank you very much for being with me for this hour. We're talking about metaphysics on the podcast today. Meta as in greater than physics. We all know that there is the three-dimensional world, but Buddha and others, including Einstein, have said that on some level, the world that we touch with our hands and that we see with our eyes is actually an illusion. Now, when you embrace that idea from a religious perspective, from a spiritual perspective, or from a scientific perspective, that doesn't mean you're stupid and that you don't know that if you drop a book onto the floor that gravity will pull it down. It doesn't mean that you don't understand that car crashes happen. It doesn't mean that you don't understand that you can't walk too close to the cliff because you might fall over. It just means that there is more to life than meets the physical eye, and that we need to go further with that realization. And what's happening in the world today, including in the world of science, including in the world of physics, particularly in the world of physics, quantum physics particularly, is that people are moving beyond the Newtonian scientific paradigm that dominated the 20th century and opening up to a paradigm of science in which the primacy and the dominance of consciousness is recognized. This has profound implications for our lives. It has profound implications for how we live individually, and it has profound implications for how we live collectively. And that's why I wanted to invite my guest on to the podcast this hour, Dr. Bruce Lipton. His books are called The Biology of Belief, Unleashing the Power of Consciousness, Matter, and Miracles, Spontaneous Evolution, Our Positive Future and a Way to Get There from Here, The Honeymoon Effect, The Science of Creating Heaven on Earth, and The Biology of Belief. Now, Dr. Lipton began his scientific career as a cell biologist. He received his PhD from the University of Virginia, and he has been a PhD research scientist at Stanford. He has also taught at the medical school at the University of Wisconsin. But some things he saw in the lab several decades ago made him rethink the kind of traditional medical paradigm that he had been teaching, that he had been writing out of. He saw some things about the way cells were reacting. He realized some things about genes and the influence on genes that came not from something inherent within them physically, but rather from environment, including mental environment. This completely changed how he looked at his work. And so much of what he talked about as far back as the 1970s that was considered kind of fringe and out there is now very much a part of mainstream scientific and medical thinking. This affects, as I said, all of our lives once we realize what it means to say that consciousness matters, consciousness creates, consciousness is the area of our greatest power. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Bruce Lipton. I really did. Also, don't forget to hang out to the end, because after my conversation with Bruce, I do take a question that in a very interesting way, I think relates to the conversation we'll be having before then. Remember, you can write to me at marianne@castmedia.com. And if your question seems like something that everybody would be interested in, I'll try to take it. Thanks so much. Bruce Lipton, thank you so much for being with me on the podcast.
Oh, Marianne, I am so honored to be with you.
Well, you and I have known each other for many years, but we've never had the chance to really get down and get real for an extended period of time like we have today. Well, there's no doubt about that. Many of the things that you and I have been talking and writing about for years have a particular relevance and urgency in the world today that I think many people did not expect. You know, I want to begin by some of the basics of your work so that people understand where you're coming from. I've already talked before you came on the line about the basic issue of metaphysics, that which is greater than physics, and the idea that consciousness is the level of cause and that the world we live in is the level of effect. Your career, your life, your work has in many ways embodied a transition from a basically 20th century mental paradigm to a 21st century mental paradigm. And people shouldn't be so shocked about this. The 20th century mindset was different than the 19th. But in the 20th century, the whole Newtonian physics, the idea that the world is just a big machine, and if you want to change the world, you change the pieces of the machine, has been changed, of course, is transformed by the furthest reaches of quantum physics, et cetera. I remember reading a physicist named James Jeans who said, it turns out the world is not a big machine. It's one big thought.
Absolutely.
Now, you yourself, as a classically, traditionally trained research scientist, someone teaching at medical schools, teaching about the cells, came to an epiphany, came to an understanding through your work in the lab that gave you a completely different perspective on all of these issues. So tell us about your story and basically how you went from there to here.
Well, basically, as you said, I started out as a conventional biomedical researcher and professor at the medical school, University of Wisconsin, and teaching the basic curriculum at that time, which was called genetic determinism, which is the philosophy or belief that genes determine the characteristics not only of our physical expression, but of our emotional and behavioral characters as well. And I say, well, what was I teaching if you think about it? And I was teaching, in fact, well, genes control your life. And then I say, as far as you know, did you pick the genes you came with? And we go, no, I don't think so. And I go, but if you don't like the characteristics, can you change those genes? And the answer is no. And then we add on top of that, the genes turn on and off by themselves. And I say, so what is the net consequence of this? And the answer is genes control our lives and we don't control the genes. And therefore we are victims of our heredity, whatever running in your family, on cancer, diabetes, whatever cardiovascular issues are attributed to genes, which then makes you like, oh my God, I inherited these genes, and now I'm going to be susceptible to all those problems. And that's what I was teaching, and that was conventional literature at the time. In fact, unfortunately, that is still the belief that the public is holding on to at this moment, even though science has transcended that belief since 1990. They changed their understanding. Because we went from what is called genetic control, genetic determinism, to a new science called epigenetic control. It sounds almost exactly the same. And I go, but it's a revolution because epi means above. So I say, what do we call skin? Epidermis. I go, what does that mean? I said, below the skin is a layer called dermis, and skin is epi, above the dermis. I say, so what does that mean in regard to epigenetics? I say, well, this character is under epigenetic control. I say, what does that mean? Control above the genes. And it's like, wait, the control's not in the genes. I go, absolutely not. Because it turns out genes are blueprints, just like building any kind, like a house or anything. But these blueprints build the physical body that we have. And I go, so why is that relevant? I say, you go into an architect's office and she's working on a blueprint, and you lean over her shoulder and you ask her, you say, hey, is your blueprint on or off? And she would look at you like, what, are you crazy? It's a blueprint. There's no on and off. And I go, precisely. Genes do not have an on and off. The significance is the blueprint can be read or the blueprint cannot be read, but in regard to the reading of the blueprint has nothing to do with genes. That genes are actually activated and modified by our consciousness, which is above the genes. And I say, so why is that relevant? I say, because you can change your consciousness. And if you change your consciousness, you change your biology. And all of a sudden I say, well, then I'm a master of my genetics, not a victim. I go, precisely. But people feel they're victims, and consciousness is controlling the genetic expression. And if you have a negative consciousness, like you're a victim, then that's what you will manifest. And the function of the mind is to make coherence between your beliefs and your reality. So if I have a belief I'm powerful, then the function of the mind is to manifest a powerful expression. And if I believe I'm a victim, then the function of the mind is to create situations to reveal I'm a victim. And unfortunately, this is the latter action that's happening on this planet right now, because we have programmed everybody through education, science, developmental programming that genes control their lives, and good luck with that. And it's like, this is wrong. because we are more powerful. In my research back at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine, I was cloning stem cells, which are embryonic cells. Everyone wonders, do I have stem cells? I'll give you a little simple answer. If you're watching this program right now, you have stem cells, because a body made out of 50 trillion cells, every day we lose hundreds of billions of cells normally, and we're still here. And I said, well, where are the replacement cells coming from? And they're called stem cells, which are embryonic cells. So very briefly, what did my research reveal that so completely conflicted with the conventional story was? I would put one stem cell in a petri dish by itself. This is called cloning. And that cell would divide every 10 hours or so. And so first there's 1, then 2, 4, 8, 16, doubling. At the end of the week, I have 30,000 cells in the petri dish. But the most important insight is this: they all are genetically identical because they all came from the same parent. So the significance about this is that I have genetically identical cells, 30,000 of them. I split them into 3 petri dishes, 10,000 in a dish, and then I feed them culture medium. And I say, well, what's culture medium? Well, that's the environment that cells grow in. What is it really? In a lab, culture medium is the laboratory version of blood. So if I grow human cells, I say, hey, what's in human blood? And then make culture medium based on that. Or I grow mouse cells. What's in mouse blood? Make culture medium for mouse cells. So I say, so what? I say, I'm making culture medium. So in the process, I make 3 slightly different versions of culture medium, changes just a little chemistry in each one. So they represent 3 different environments. And so I have 3 dishes, genetically identical cells and all, but I feed them a different culture medium, 3 different culture media, 3 different environments. And one dish, the cells form muscle. The other dish, they form bone. And the third dish, the stem cells form fat cells. And then you stand back and you go, so what controlled the fate of the cells? And the answer is, well, wait, they were all genetically identical. The only thing that was different was the composition of the culture medium, which then changed the expression. And all of a sudden it says, the genes didn't control this, the environment controlled the cells. And then I go, oh, that's really nice, cells in a plastic dish. And then one last thing here, Marianne, and that is when you look at yourself in the mirror and you see one living entity, I go, that's an illusion, because a human body is made out of 50 trillion cells. A human body is a community of cells. And so I refer to it, we are skin-covered petri dish. And I go, inside my skin-covered dish, 50 trillion cells, but I have the original growth medium. And I say, what's that? Blood. And I go, oh, so in my skin-covered dish, my cells are in an environment of blood, and it's the chemistry of the blood that determines the genetics. And then all of a sudden you say, yeah, but what determines the chemistry? And I go, the mind. And as we have different thoughts, the thoughts generate complementary chemistry. You have good thoughts, you get good complementary chemistry. You got scary thoughts, you got scary 50 trillion cells now. So what was the point? We are powerful creators of our life experiences. We are not victims of our genetics. With consciousness, you can, Gina said, is a blueprint to make a protein, which is a building block of the body. I said, with consciousness, I can use the same blueprint and create over 3,000 different proteins from one blueprint. And I go, so why is it relevant? I say, you're the master. Your consciousness will look at your genes and adjust it to fit your vision of the world. And if you have a negative vision of the world, then negative chemistry comes forth. But if you're in love, for example, the wonderful chemistry of love that you find in the blood as well, dopamine for pleasure, oxytocin to bond you with that source, vasopressin, a hormone that makes you more attracted to keep your partner, and growth hormone. And I go, wow, if you make a cocktail out of those elements called culture medium, the cells thrive like crazy. But then I say, well, what if you have a thought of fear? I go, the love chemistry doesn't come out of the brain. Fear chemistry, stress hormones, factors that regulate the immune system that shut it down come out in fear. And I go, oh. I said, what's the relevance? I say, the blood in a state of fear has chemistry that doesn't support vitality. In fact, it shuts down the system. And I go, because in protection, you wall yourself off, so you shut it down. I go, so love gives you growth. Fear shuts off your growth. And all of a sudden I say, yeah, but the vision of love and fear is what determines the chemistry, which in turn determines genetic activity. Conclusion, your thoughts are manifesting not just your interior life expression, but also your behavior that influences your life in the outside world.
Many, many years ago, I read a book called The Nature of Personal Reality by Jane Roberts. I was in my 20s when I read that book, and it completely blew my mind. And it was the first time I had ever read the idea that thoughts, consciousness, that this is the level of cause, and that everything that we experience in life is our thoughts projected onto a screen. And of course, so many of the mistakes we make are like trying to go up to the screen when you don't like the movie and to try to change the plot there. But that's not where the plot or the characters originated. They're all just projections. This that you just described is basically the difference between a 20th century and a 21st century paradigm. In the 20th century, the basic idea was that consciousness had nothing to do with physical reality, certainly not the body. And now there is this recognition that what we think affects the body and affects much more than just the body as well, right?
It affects everything that we do, our behavior. So let me just add this really important point, Marianne, before we go on, because this is fundamental, and is what? The old belief system, 20th century belief system, was based on Newtonian physics that separated the universe into a material and an energy realm, and said that the energy realm does not affect the material realm. I go, well, a body is made out of matter, so if you want to affect the body in that consciousness, then you have to put chemistry, physical things, and do physical things to affect it. In 1927, when quantum physics came in, and I have to emphasize, it's the most valid science on this planet. There is no science that has been tested more or affirmed more to be truthful than any other science but quantum physics. And I go, so, okay, the most truthful science in the world, what's the first principle? Consciousness is creating our life experiences. And all of a sudden it says, oh my God, it's not the body primary. It was the consciousness that shaped the body and shaped the body's experience in the world. So rather than trying to fix the body, which we always do, we say, oh, illness is related to genes. Fact, less than 1% of illness is connected to genes. 90% of illness is stress related, which is what? The chemistry of a brain not living in harmony. And I say, so why is it relevant? Well, to heal the health crisis, we need a change in consciousness, because that is what causes everything below the brain to manifest. And so this is why your work over all these years, and I'm so honored to be with you about it, is to emphasize this most important point, because it gives power back to the individual. After the 20th century science took away all power, it comes the other way. We are fully powerful creators.
Some of the things that I've heard people say, particularly in relation to my own work, is, oh, she's anti-science. And I'm like, no, I'm just modern science. You're stuck in the science of the 20th century that is now considered obsolete. You know, in every area of certainly in American society and throughout the world in various ways, you have Fortune 500 CEOs who go to business conferences where they have meditation sessions. You have Harvard University holding symposiums on integrative medicine. You have educational conferences where they talk about the whole child. In other words, in corner after corner after corner of our society, people are realizing that what you're describing, which is basically a scientific discovery, has implications for everything that we do, everything that we are. It has ushered in a far more holistic, a far more integrative, a far more whole person way of looking at the world.
And if you can regulate the child's developmental program, then you regulate their life. And I go, this is not new. For 400 years, the Jesuits have told their followers, give me a child until it is 7 and I will show you the man. What did they know that we now know scientifically? Is that 7 years is a programming period to get us off the ground. But for the rest of our lives, 95% of our life is not coming from our creative wishes and desires. That 95% of our life is coming from the programs we received. So that we're not expressing our power, we're expressing the programs. And most of those programs are disempowering, self-sabotaging, and limiting beliefs. And then try to grow up in a world where the first thing you've been programmed is you have no power, and realize it's a struggle.
Yeah. Well, this is not just something we have to go back 400 years. We can go back thousands of years to a man thinketh. We can go to Buddha. We can go to Jesus. We can go to Plato. The idea of the power of thought. And what you just said, talking about so much of the medical establishment, that there are billions and billions of dollars here that are made predicated on people's disempowering thoughts. The idea that we can't do much by ourselves, but we have to take this or take that or rely on this or rely on that. There's a lot of money and power that falls away from one particular group if we start accepting how much power we have as individuals to change the world.
This is 100% true. And look, I was a professor in a medical school, and I can tell you very clearly that the money coming from the pharmaceutical industry very significantly shaped our curriculum. And the idea about it was, well, all this new information about energy and consciousness was coming forth. The medical school system actually didn't put it into the curriculum at all. And the idea is, I'll give you a simple reason. If we could take our consciousness and put it into a pill, then the pharmaceutical companies would be giving us pills to, help us with consciousness. But you can't monetize consciousness. So the reality is, if you become conscious and all powerful in your creation, then who's going to buy the drugs? That's where the money comes in and said, take them away from that thought. Because keep them into a drug buying public. And as you said, it's one of the biggest industries on the entire planet. Its money is pervasive and it's a repressive business. It doesn't give power to people. And the doctors know that the biggest problem with people is their health is compromised by their lifestyle. And so when you go to a doctor, you think, okay, I would get a prescription of what? Better lifestyle, work out, eat better food, do all these good things. No, you go to the doctor and they go, here's a pill. It's like not even giving you the information that you are powerful, but saying the pill is powerful. And that's a real important part. And just to add a little piece to that, because it fits in our story, most people are familiar with something called the placebo effect. I go, what's that? And I say, well, you've got a particular illness that you're having trouble with. The doctor shows up and says, here's the newest medicine. It's even colored purple because that's even more powerful color. Actually, that was in an ad. And they said, this is the greatest medicine. This is exactly going to, help you with your problem. You take the medicine, you get better. And then you find out that pill was a sugar pill. And I said, then what the heck healed you? And the answer was not the sugar pill, your belief in the sugar pill. Now that's called placebo effect. And everybody goes, yeah, science recognized it 75 years. That's a scientific principle, mind over matter. And I go, yeah, this is true. They don't emphasize the placebo effect because you can't sell it as much as you can a drug. And more importantly, and this is the piece I just want to add to close with this, is that placebo effect is based on positive thinking. I go, yeah. I said, what about negative thinking? Oh, guess what? Equally powerful.
Right, and making us
thinking.
sick. 90% of all visits to the doctors are on some level from stress-related injury and stress-related illness, right? Well, I think that the resistance to this remains, however, the place where we are stuck. Not so much people realizing that consciousness is so powerful, because I think that you and others have taken us to a point where the critical mass has been created. There is an openness. People are not stupid. But I know when I ran for political office, I saw what happens to you when you dare to suggest that maybe we should have some healthy skepticism about the profit-making motives of big pharmaceutical companies. Anything in any way questioning that there should be some oversight here. We know, for instance, that we know the billions of dollars that will now be paid by Purdue Pharmaceuticals. We know about the scandal with the Sackler families. We know that attorneys general all over the country have been indicting pharmaceutical executives for their known role in the creation and the maintenance of the opioid crisis. So my point was, why should we just assume that they're as pure as the driven snow in every other area? And what I experienced in my own life was the vicious way they come at you if you dare to in any way question the dominance or the primacy of big pharmaceuticals. They will create whatever they have to do to make sure that you will not be listened to. And that is a very, very big deal. I know when I ran for the nomination in my healthcare plan, in my whole health plan, I had a situation where if you went to the doctor, and the doctor, which, as you said, the pharmaceutical companies take such a role in funding and dominating the curriculum in medical schools that most medical students who have learned so much about pharmaceutical treatment of medicine have learned so little in comparison about nutrition, about exercise, not to even mention consciousness. So one of the things I had in my plan was that if you went to the doctor, you were diagnosed with an illness, and the doctor gave you a pharmaceutical prescription, that it was mandated, you were guaranteed to also be informed about any non-pharmaceutical option that had been proven to be equally or nearly efficacious. Most people don't know. Most people go to the doctor, and most of the doctors, I think, are very well-intentioned, but this is the way they have been educated, the pharmaceutical.
And that's the way we've been educated as patients.
Right.
When in the developmental period, which really determines the character of our lives, recognize this in most families. When somebody is sick, they say, "Oh, we have to go to the doctor," and they take people to doctors. So for the first 7 years of your life, where you're downloading programs, what program did you get when it comes to your health? And the answer is, I'm not in charge of my health. The doctor is in charge of my health. I give up power over my own health to accept the word of the medical people. And so I gave up power. And that's why when we go to the doctor and the doctor says X, Y, or Z, we manifest X, Y, and Z because that's the belief system that they know and we don't. So in the system, we've all been programmed to be victims, to purchase more of this medical stuff. And, and people, we have a war on illegal drugs. Oh my God, they're illegal drugs. We're going to get rid of them. And I go, about 34,000 people die every year in
From
the U.S.
legal.
300,000 from legal.
Right. That's the biggest drug crisis in America is legal drugs. And the biggest drug pushers are pharmaceutical companies. And this is not anti-medicine. I'm very grateful for medicine. A few months ago, I had rotator cuff surgery. And I'm very grateful that I had health insurance. It really radicalized me on the issue of Medicare for all. I'm very grateful for the fact that through Western medicine, I could have that tendon sewn back onto the bone that it separated from. And I have to tell you, I was very, very grateful for the pain pills. There is absolutely no doubt about it. But I noticed that they just throw a pharmacy at you. And even though I did not have a difficult time weaning myself off from the really strong addictive narcotics, I didn't have a difficult time weaning myself because when you actually have pain, they don't make you high. So I didn't have a problem. But still, I was on so many pills. And I had an experience. I had gone to Houston for a family funeral. And I was in my hotel room. And I was still, because they just throw them at you, take this, try the Melexicam, try this one, try that one. And, people talk about listen to your body. I had an experience, Bruce, where it was like my entire body yelled at me, no more pills. It was like I felt the cells of my body screaming at me, no more pills. It was like very clear to me. Somehow, if I continued with the pills, I think I might have gotten sick. My body wanted that stuff out of my system and I could feel it.
Well, absolutely, because what people don't realize is that when we talk about cells and they go, oh, those are, the little stupid things that, everything less than human is less and less intelligent. You get down to the level of a cell, you go, what intelligence does a cell have? I go, they created us. We are a creation of a cellular community. There's more intelligence inside my body than humans can come up with right now. There are technologies that cells have created that humans can't even compete with at this point. And so when your cells, you have a cellular community and your mind is like a government, facilitating coordination of what's going on. And I go, the relevance is, yes, there's feedback from the cellular community. They're called symptoms and feelings and emotions, and they're coming back. Why? To inform the government whether is everything working in our community or not. Pay attention. And then we have a tendency to do what? Oh, well, we have a symptom we don't want to pay attention to. So the pharmaceutical company gladly provides us with a drug. It says, shut off the symptom. You don't have to pay attention to it. And I go, oh my God. That's a community. When there's harmony in the community of cells, that's health. When there's disharmony in the community of cells, that's dis-ease. And the idea is what? Cells talk to us. And if you don't listen to those feelings, then you're ignoring a population that could fall apart on you. And that's what happens.
And not only is that true physically, it's also true psychically. The physical body has an immune system, and so does the psyche. And the idea of just covering symptoms, suppressing symptoms, trying to eradicate symptoms rather than dealing with the root cause of illness. This idea that we can use these kinds of insights to heal the entire planet. You know, I heard you say in an interview that the human race needs a spontaneous remission.
We're in a disease state, not a disease of physicality, a disease of consciousness.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Yes, and here's what's neat. I could read your consciousness, Marianne, by putting wires on your head. It's called electroencephalograph. And I could read your brain function. And everybody goes, yeah, my brain function inside my head. It's inside my thoughts are in my head. And I go, there's another device to read brain function. It's not electroencephalograph. It's called magnetoencephalograph, MEG. I go, so what's unique? And I go, the probe for magnetoencephalograph does not even touch the body. It's out here. I say, what's it doing? It's reading my brain function in here, my consciousness. I go, my consciousness is not contained in my head. My consciousness is broadcast out in the field.
Right.
And consciousness is what shapes our experiences. So consciousness that goes inside is shaping my genetics, my health, and my interior issue. But the consciousness I broadcast on the outside is influencing everybody else that has consciousness. And I say each of us is a tuning fork. And I say, well, if the mass of us, our tuning forks are saying victim fear, then the big energy field that is shaping human civilization is now responding to fear, shutting down the mechanism and all that stuff. And I say, if we want to change civilization, the old saying from the old days was, before you go out and change the world, take care of your own backyard. And this applies right here. It says, you want to change civilization, first you have to change your consciousness. You have to recognize you're a powerful person. You're a creator. This is quantum physics, most valid science. I go, why? Because if we start broadcasting consciousness of positive, affirmative actions, things that we can do. I'm a tuning fork. You're a tuning fork. There's another tuning fork. What's the point? Every tuning fork offers a certain amount of energy field. But when you get large numbers of people with the same thoughts, that field is so palpable that it physically changes the world in which we live.
Well,
and so, yes.
The metaphysical notion is that all minds are joined. In the Course in Miracles, it says, you are like waves in the ocean thinking you're separate from other waves. But in fact, there's no place where one wave stops and another wave starts, just like sunbeams. There's no separate sunbeams. They all are connected to the other. And the psychological difference is profound. If I think of myself as one wave separate from the other waves, then I'm terrified that I will be overwhelmed and annihilated by the rest of the ocean. But if I realize that I'm one with every other wave, then it's more of the realization, like they say, if a bird flaps its wings at the South Pole, it affects the wind currents on the North Pole. Every time a wave moves, it affects every other waves. That's
Absolutely.
why it's so important to realize when you walk into a room, everybody subconsciously knows everything. Everybody's feeling your energy, maybe not on a conscious level. But, it's like when you walk into a room and you can just kind of feel it when people have been bad-mouthing you.
Yeah.
You can also feel it when you walk into a room and there's a lot of love and welcome for you. You can feel these things. And so we can go so far towards generating our own experience by blessing people before we walk into the room. And that's not just some woo-woo, silly, magical thinking, except in the very highest sense. It's recognizing the power of consciousness and that this is the more sophisticated, not the less sophisticated way of looking at the world.
100%. In fact, it's this. Outside of humans, which we have created this vocabulary and language, which we then work with that field. All other organisms, from bacteria, the most primitive, all the way up to including humans, the first line of information coming in is an energy field.
Right.
That's all it does. And I say, like, a snail doesn't have parents that hang out and teach it what to do. I say, well, it comes out of the egg and somehow it goes and eats the right thing, goes in the right direction. I go, how does it know? And the answer is, it simply has one gauge on its dashboard. energy.
Wow.
And I say, why is it relevant? If you move in a direction where the energy gets greater, more energy, more life. If you move in a direction where the energy drops, you lose life. Excuse me. So the point is simply this. Organisms read the energy before anything else. And the energy is either going to be enhanced, that's called constructive interference, good vibes, or the energy is going to be depleting, which is called destructive interference, bad vibes. And I go, they didn't have any schooling. They just read the energy. And I say, we are capable of doing that. But most of us, when we were young, were programmed, well, don't go by your feelings. Listen to what the person has to say. And I go, well, that was your first big mistake. Because yes.
Often when I do business seminars and talking to people about career advancement, et cetera, I point out there will always be someone whose resume is as good as yours. There will always be someone whose achievement level is as good as yours. But what really happens is that after you leave the room, there are going to be people talking about whether or not to hire you. And time and time again, among the most powerful people doing the hiring, someone will say, I don't know. I just have a feeling about her. Or, I don't know. There's just something about him. I'm not feeling it. We know this. We know this. There's somebody who will just say, I'm not feeling it, or I just have a feeling, positive or negative. And so that should be part of our education. That should be part of our understanding of our own power, as you say, that our thoughts about everything affect our attitudes, affect our energy, and then other people pick that up, at least on a subconscious level. In A Course in Miracles, Bruce, it says that every thought creates form on some level. We are so undereducated about and underappreciative of the power of our thinking to determine our life experience. We think, oh, well, nobody knows that I'm thinking this, but it's registered. It's like the universe itself has eyes. The place where I see this, that I think about it so much these days, is we have 1 billion people on the planet who live on less than $1 a day. That's called deep poverty. And we have another billion above that who live on less than $2 a day. The amount of human suffering there is so gargantuan. We have 12,000 children every day who starve. And when you think not only of the suffering of that starving child, but the suffering of the parent holding the child, who when the child says, Mommy or Daddy, I'm hungry, has absolutely nothing to give them. You compare that to the fact that there's no dearth of food, at least at this point. I mean, God knows what's going to happen if we continue to fail to repair the environment. We could have heat so great that there would be massive food shortages. But right now, it's simply a social agreement that is lacking. Buckminster Fuller and others have proven that we have the technological ability. We could feed every person on this planet. Every person on this planet could have a place to live. And every person on this planet could have the capacity to thrive, have every cultural, economic, and social opportunity to do that. Think of the ways in which we could change our thinking as a human race away from it's all about me to it's all about us. And in the body, on a cellular level, isn't it all about me? The quintessential malignancy, a cell that instead of thinking of itself as here to collaborate with other cells in order to serve the healthy functioning of the whole, instead says, I want to go off and do my own thing. That's what the malignant cell is. And it seems to me that that's a malignancy in consciousness as well as in the body, and that's what's happened to the human race. We have been infected by a malignant consciousness, which is the thought that it's all about me. I'm not connected to others. What happens to others has nothing to do with what happens to me. And isn't that what's killing us all? Or threatening to kill us all?
And that thought has become a program. I said, where did that thought come from? And the answer is Darwinian theory of evolution predicates the fact that life is a struggle for survival, and that survival is then based on a competition for fitness. And I say, well, why is that relevant? Because that theory, which is incorrect, but programmed, says, I have to compete with all of you guys for my survival. So I don't care about you. I have to care about me first. And that's why survival of the fittest didn't say survival of everyone. It just said who's the best. And I go, so why is that relevant? Because we now know Darwinian theory based on competition is scientifically bankrupt. That evolution is based on cooperation,
Well,
not
from what I've
competition.
read about Darwin, he himself would agree with you. I think Darwin himself would say there's been a lot of misinterpretation of what I said. But even if you say that it will be survival of the fittest, the line in the Bible, the meek shall inherit the earth. Okay.
Yes.
In the Course in Miracles, it says the meek shall inherit the earth because their strength will take the place over. So in a way, you could say the meek shall inherit the earth. It is survival of the fittest. It's just that the fittest, as we move into the 21st century, the most fit person is someone who knows how to cooperate.
Well, exactly, because our conventional belief is it's a dog-eat-dog world. That's built
Right.
into whether you went to school or you didn't go
Right.
to school. And it says, I'm out for me, and I don't care about you. So 1 million Africans can be dying of starvation. We've got food we're throwing away in the garbage. And we go, well, that's just Darwinian theory. They're just
Right.
not the fittest.
Right.
And we accept that as, oh, you can let them all die because they're not the fittest? And it's like, this is completely antagonistic to evolution on this planet. Evolution from the beginning has always been based on community. And we have broken that community up in individual pieces, saying, don't care about the rest, just take care of yourself. I go, that is the breakdown
Right.
of a
That's the
civilization.
malignancy. And when the malignant cell, when the body is destroyed, of course, the malignant cell is destroyed as well. The first guest that I had on this podcast was our mutual friend, Carolyn Mace. And she
Yes.
talked about how COVID is an expression of the soul sickness in America today. And you can't look at the fact that consciousness is the creative element without recognizing cause and effect, or karma, which is that every thought not only creates form, but that you will experience that form. So we're having the mirror put up to us. This is what your thoughts have been. Who you are today, what you're experiencing today is a product of yesterday's thinking. And what you're saying is that we can change our thinking today, right?
We must. And remember, our thinking is generating a field. Okay.
Right.
And I say, let me give you a quantum physics thing that just emphasizes the most important point. This is from Einstein. The field is the sole governing agency of the particle. What he was saying is that the energy fields are what shape matter.
Right.
And our energy fields are coming from our consciousness.
So I just want to make sure that we get the basic points very clear for everyone here.
Yes.
A lot of what you said made me think about this new movie, Social Dilemma, and the
Yes.
incredibly toxic field that social media has created. And it's so interesting. Years ago, if somebody was advertising a resort somewhere, they would say, "Oh, and you can use your computer; it's on the grid." Now, people are advertising that you're off the grid when you come to this place. And many people, I think I read something, yourself included, have said one of the ways I take care of my consciousness is by not listening to all that stuff all day. And it's a real challenge, I think, to living at this time to be informed enough, but not allowing our consciousness to be so assaulted by all the toxicity out there that it depletes us, including physically.
Well, this is part of why this evolution is not you sit in an easy chair and wait, and evolution is going to occur outside when you go out. It's like this is participatory evolution.
Right.
If we want to change, we're the ones that have to change,
Right.
not the planet.
Right.
And so we're out there trying to change the planet. It's guys, no, first you have to adjust what you're broadcasting because what you're broadcasting is the source of manifestation.
And I think that the consciousness of a leader really plays in here. I think a lot of the problems that people had with Donald Trump was the unbelievable toxicity of the things he was saying and spewing. Obviously, he was thinking and just putting out into the field. And I think a lot of the trauma that people were experiencing was not only from his policies, but simply the thoughts that he was stating, the mean-spiritedness, the racism, the bigotry, etc. But all of us in our own lives, I see it on Twitter. I see it within myself. Thinking something or about to say something and knowing, Marianne, change that thought. Bite your tongue, change the thought. It will make all the difference for you, and it will make all the difference in your influence on the world.
I had to do exactly the same thing when I learned that, wait a minute, my thoughts are creating this. So what are my thoughts? And when I started to actually listen to them, most of them were negative, disempowering, and redundant.
Right.
And I realized if I'm going to change, I cannot let that thought manifest. I have to say, correct, that's not what I want. And by doing that, I reprogrammed so that old patterns of negative thinking, I rewrote them.
Right.
And I have to be honest, my world is completely different now after 50 than it was before 50 because I was part of the conventional world. I moved into this world, changing consciousness, and be honest, I live in heaven. My whole world is different. What's coming to me and what I'm getting involved with is so completely different and so much healthier than before. It's a manifestation that says, oh my God, I did it myself.
But, but we have to find that sweet spot, don't we? Because like if you were living in the late 30s in Germany, at what point you have to, I know the way it says in the Course in Miracles, look at the crucifixion, but do not dwell on it. If you don't look at any of the negativity happening at all, you're not in transcendence, you're in denial. But if you look at it all day, every day, then it sucks you in and you actually contribute to the toxicity. So it's finding that balance where you are not personally demonizing someone with your thoughts, and yet at the same time, you are absolutely setting a boundary for the sake of the health and well-being of yourself, your children, and your planet. And that's an art form. And I know for myself, it's very challenging, but if you go too far one direction or the other, you're out of,
balance.
You're out of balance. I do know that a common story in Germany in the early days of Nazi ascendance is people saying, have you seen Mrs. Schwartz recently? I haven't seen her family. I haven't seen them come out of their house. Their children haven't been attending school. Have you seen the Schwartzes recently? And the Aryan neighbor would say, oh, let's just be positive. Let's not think about that. Let's just think about positive things. So we all have to think about all of this, and no one articulates these issues better than you do, Bruce. I have learned so much from you. I have sat in the audience. I have read your material. I want everybody to know now, is there a website? I've listed your book separately in the introduction. Yeah. Is there a website you want to tell people about where they can find out more about you?
Thank you very much, because the website brucelipton.com has all free downloadable written material, audio files, video presentations, and all of that to substantiate the things that we're talking about. And so it's freely downloadable. And so it's a resource that can give us an opportunity to see the world in a different way. And when we really see it in that different way and behave in that new way, we create the new world. And this is what the evolutionary crisis we're facing right now is saying. We must look at the world in a different way right now because it has been self-destructive to this moment.
And you have talked about what goes on in our brains when we are in love. So clearly the way to repair the world is that we all start loving each other. And
yes, it's always been true. And I never knew that because my programming didn't really understand how to deal with love. I mean, my programming came from my parents and my life reflected their behavior relationship until I learned to change it. I was in a lot of trouble because it was dysfunctional. Right. And the fact is, most families have dysfunction built in, which then become programs, and then we manifest dysfunction. And in manifesting it, we create
Well,
dysfunction.
A lot of people would say that if we just go around loving each other, there will be more dysfunction. Some people would suggest that if we just love and forgive each other all the time, it's as though that will make us less intelligent, as though that will decrease our brain cells. But I think that it's quite the opposite, because when we stand in love, we stand in wisdom. And when you stand in wisdom, you own your yes and you own your no. Love has more than enough capacity to say no. I love my child enough that no, you cannot play with scissors when you're 3 years old. So the idea that we start to love one another is the opposite of the dysfunctional way to try to live our lives. It's the most functional way we can try to live our lives.
And biochemically, of course, the cocktail of love hormones are the things that enhance every part of our vitality. Our physiological vitality and our conscious vitality are fed by love, which is a vibration of harmony.
Well, let me ask you this, because Freud, of course, had that term polymorphously perverse sexuality. We have taken so much of the love hormone and so much of the love consciousness and narrowed it into the field of human sexuality, lust, etc. But there is a kind of love, the agape love, the love that moves beyond eros into philia, into agape, where we can start thinking more in terms of love for the world that isn't only the love of the sexual, the romantic, the intimate. And I also, and I've seen this in my own life, the more I get that my love for the world is an expansion of who I am as a person, that has only helped me in my capacity to love and to be loved on a very personal level.
And because you're broadcasting that vibration, anybody that is in harmony with that vibration will seek you out. So you start sending out the vibration of love, and all the people that are experiencing that will surround you, tuning forks, blasting love, and manifesting what? A community of love. And that community grows and grows and grows. And the intention is the global community of love is the resolution of our evolution that we're facing right now. And since it's all been predicated on fear, not enough, and they're going to take my stuff and I'm going to have to beat them, I go, that's a violent culture.
Right.
And it can go away.
Martin Luther King said that the desegregation of the American South was the political externalization of the goal of the civil rights community, but of the movement, but that the whole total goal, the ultimate goal, was the creation of the beloved community.
And that is evolution.
That's evolution.
That has always been evolution is driven by community. And when you break community, you've canceled evolution. And we have now broken community. People are independent, not even connecting with their neighbors in any sense. I go, you lost the whole foundation of evolution.
It's a malignant thought. And to build on community, to build on care for one another, to build on the idea that our mission in life, our purpose in life is to create the beloved community, is the healing and is the repair. And I think that the final point here is it's not just a good idea. It's actually the only survivable option for the human race.
I agree 100% because this is what evolution was built on, community.
Thank you. The cells need to cooperate and collaborate, and so do we. God bless you, Bruce. I love you. Thank you so much for being with me on the podcast, and it's a joy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm honored to be with you. And again, more so with a wonderful community that is following you because their consciousness is the consciousness of a new world. That's right. And I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. I am so glad that we had the opportunity to talk to Bruce Lipton. He is such an example of what he talks about. He's such a living embodiment of the kind of energy that emanates from a person who has taken full responsibility for the thoughts that they think, the emanations of love and positivity that come from him. You can see it in him that he lives it. You can see in him the way that this has influenced the way he ages, among other things. And even more importantly, it's obviously contagious. Okay, so now we get into the question section of our podcast where you can send me questions at Marianne@castmedia.com. That's cast with a K, and I will try to answer. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, I hope that you will rate and review on iTunes and also check us out at YouTube and tell your friends about it. This question is from Farhana. Thank you for starting your podcast. I've loved reading your books and listening to you. The podcast is a great addition. I am interested in stories about relationship struggles and how to build win-win relationships and communicate clearly. I'm a mother of 2 grown-up girls who are upset with me, a difficult marriage and a lot of grief from losing family members early on in life. I need your support to navigate this life. I've attended your Women's Weekend in Los Angeles and found it very empowering. Please keep doing what you do. You help so many of us. Thank you for spreading love, compassion, understanding. We need it. Thank you. Well, thank you. And it's very interesting, this question, in relation to the things we were talking about with Bruce Lipton. Now, I said a few minutes ago in my conversation with Bruce, the part from the Course in Miracles where it says, you are like sunbeams to the sun, thinking you are separate from other sunbeams. The idea, as Bruce was saying, is that consciousness does not stop at the confines of the physical body. So your consciousness is moving outward all the time in all directions of time and space. Now, we were talking earlier in my conversation with Bruce about the fact that people subconsciously know everything because our receptors, we have physical receptors like the physical eyes and the physical ears, physical touch, but we also have unconscious receptors. We have receptors on levels that the conscious mind isn't even aware of. It's like when you walk into a place and you just sense danger. Where do you get that from? It's because there are receptors going out before you and around you that do not necessarily come from a rational analysis of a situation. Now, to say that we are like sunbeams thinking we are separate from other sunbeams is the same thing as saying that we think we are separate from other people. On the level of the three dimensions, of course, we're separate from other people. On the level of the human body, of course, we're separate from other people. And because we are taught to see the world in terms of the three dimensions, remember Einstein said time and space are aspects of illusions of consciousness. He said time and space are illusions of consciousness. He said, albeit persistent ones. So I think of you as over there and me over here. When I shift my perception to the realization that there's actually, because we're all dwelling on the level of consciousness, there's really no place where you stop and I start. My perception of you is that we are already one. That means what I think about you is affecting how I think about myself, and what I do to you affects what I do to myself. In A Course in Miracles, it says, whenever you're about to have a judgmental or an attacking thought, think of a sword that is dropping on the head of the other person, but realize it's dropping on you. So, the most powerful thing you can do when you are having a relationship difficulty with someone, get ready for it, because some of you are going to be triggered by this. Pray for their happiness 5 minutes a day. Pray for their happiness. Now, we talked in another podcast about praying for a wave of forgiveness to come upon you both, that you might see only the innocence in yourselves and in each other. But that's what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is selective remembering. Forgiveness is remembrance that only the innocence in which we were created is the ultimate truth about who we are. So, Farhana, what I would suggest to you is that, number one, you pray that a power greater than yourself, just like they talk about in AA, that a power greater than you can do for you what you cannot do for yourself. When you realize that you are powerless before an addiction, that this entire idea of a movement into a 21st century consciousness is actually, there's a part in the Course in Miracles where it says psychotherapy and religion and science, they all meet in the same place. The Course doesn't say science, but the idea that truth is one, whether it's understood in terms of relationships, whether it's understood in terms of science, whether it's understood in terms of religion, that at the highest level, we see something we didn't see before. And what we see is that there's life beyond just what we see with the physical eye. So the idea of a celestial realm, the idea of a thought system beyond our own, which is really what religion and spirituality are based on, is the idea that there can be a kind of divine intercession from a thought system beyond our own. Right now, what your daughters and you, what people have said, what people have done, this person said that and it hurt your feelings. This person said that and it triggered something from childhood. The level on which we register those things is not the level of our healing. But we can ask for help, because sometimes, given how programmed we have been by the thinking of the world, it's not as easy as saying, okay, well, I won't think about that anymore. Sometimes people say, oh, change your thoughts. Well, sometimes that's easy and sometimes it's not, because if some thought form that you have is based on a trigger of abuse, let's say, from when you were a child, the whole idea of praying for help is that you are asking a power greater than you to help you make the shift. And that's what prayer is. Prayer is the medium of that miraculous breakthrough, where you stand surrendered before a power that is greater than yours. And you say, my daughters, and that's painful. I'm a mom. There are very few fractures in relationship more painful than the fracture between a parent and a child. When your child is angry at you, and when they're a teenager, it's kind of like, that's fine. I don't care if you're angry now. I care if you're going to be angry in therapy 10 years from now. But when they're adults and there's a fracture and you're afraid that this is, this could go on, this could affect your relationship with your grandchildren or future grandchildren, Or it could be a fracture with a husband or a lover or a friend. Start by saying that all the thoughts that I've had, that they hurt me, or all of the guilt that I feel because I hurt them, something they said to me that hurts me, or something that I said that I regret saying, a place where I have found guilt in them. The Course in Miracles says, only what you are not giving can be lacking in any situation. And I know I'm no different than anybody else. I see it all the time. They did this to me. They did that to me. They said this to me. They said that to me. Yeah, but what did you do to them? Or what have you thought about them? I have to just go around thinking about all kinds of people while I'm tempted to attack, and just send your love, send your love, send your love. It is the only way to alchemize that energy. And where there is love, miraculous breakthroughs happen is the same thing as saying that where we love, situations have the opportunity to begin again. So think about that person. You're thinking about your 2 adult daughters, but the rest of us are thinking about whoever we're having a difficult relationship with. And in our own way, we pray, whatever that means for us, that our minds be changed. This doesn't mean we're condoning anything. The universe will right itself more effectively if we do not hold on to grievances and resentment. Where we attack, where we have a grievance, and where we resent, we are only deflecting the miraculous breakthrough that will otherwise occur. And we send love to those people with whom we have had a difficult relationship. We replace every thought of attack, judgment, blame, and fear with thoughts of love, if we can only even get there for a moment. And in the space of this love, breakthroughs will occur. For that is how powerful our thoughts are. And so it is. Farhana, I expect to hear about a change in your relationship with your daughters, and I hope that you will write in and tell me about it so I can read to everybody the kind of shift that you experienced. All my best. Okay, everybody, that's it for our podcast. I hope that you enjoyed this hour. I hope that you feel it gave you some things to think about in your own life. We can change our lives, and perhaps on a level even more important, we can change the entire world. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time.